Good morning. My name is Bryn Burkett, and I am your worship associate for this service. I want to welcome you to the Amarillo Unitarian Universalist Fellowship Radical Summer Series. Each week, we will feature a guest speaker from our local community or invite you to a virtual visit of another UU congregation across North America. We are a welcoming community that welcomes you as you are, inclusive of all your identities, complexities, and situations. Our spiritual community lives courage, nurtures wonder, inspires justice, and includes all. Please join me in reciting our opening affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship. For this high purpose do we unite in worship. Blessed is the match consumed by the kindling flame. Blessed is the flame that burns in the heart's secret places. Blessed is the heart with strength to stop its beating for honor's sake. Blessed is the match consumed by kindling flame.
The Black-led freedom movement has long insisted that there are two things we white folks need to learn: when to shut up and when to speak up. For example, one whiteness blind spot is our thinking that we have something important to say. Having been a preacher for 50 plus years, I know whereof I speak. Sometimes it's best to hold that thought. But on the other side, there's an equally perilous precipice, the danger of silence when you are the one who must speak up. Slaveholder religion. How do you justify the unjustifiable? That's what we're talking about. Isabel Wilkerson, a Pulitzer Prize winner and author of The Warmth of Other Suns, it's a book about the great black migration from the South. Isabel says, no adult alive today will live to see a time when the time of enslavement was equal to the time of freedom. And that shows you that this history is long and the history is deep. She goes on, our country is really like an old house. I love old houses. I've always lived in old houses. But old houses need a lot of work, and the work is never done. And that's what our country is like. And you may not want to go into that basement, but if you don't go into that basement, it's at your own peril. And I think that whatever you are ignoring is not going to go away. Whatever you're ignoring is only going to get worse. Whatever you're ignoring will be there to be reckoned with until you reckon with it. And I think that's what we're called upon to do where we are right now. It's been a century and a half since the Civil War. Nevertheless, slaveholder religion of that era persists today. Just a brief history lesson about the development. It began as early as the writing of the Constitution. Quakers argued in 1782 for the abolition of slavery. By the mid-19th century, Christian abolitionists using the Bible to make a case for racial equality were gaining traction. Plantation owners, the richest Americans of their time, the original one percenters, could not let this stand. The moral argument could not be on the side of the abolitionists. So the planters paid preachers to use the Bible to develop arguments favoring slavery. One of those arguments found a way to support slavery using Scripture to prove white supremacy. Slave, obey your master. God himself, it's always a himself, has decreed the dark man should submit to the white man. By and by, slave, your soul will be in heaven. In the meantime, know your place. It's in the book. That's slaveholder religion. After the South lost the Civil War, slavery was abolished, but slaveholder religion never went away. It never repented, and it's with us still. How do you justify the unjustifiable, the inexcusable? You wrap it in pages of Scripture and tradition and individual morality, and you call it God's will. All the while, it's really about maintaining white privilege. Reverend Dr. William Barber, a moral giant from North Carolina and a tireless crusader for social justice, he's the founder of the Repairers of the Breach, and he's the leader of the modern Poor People's Campaign, says that there are 5 interlocking problems that must be addressed together to heal the deep problems that face us in the United States. The problems, he says, include systemic racism, poverty and economic justice, environmental restoration, militarism and the war economy, and listen up here, the conservative Christian right. Why does he say such? Well, how is it that people whose primary concern appears to be abortion, homosexuality, prayer in schools, evolution, feminism, Christians they say they are, how is it that they support tax cuts for the wealthy, cuts to social programs, and an increase in military funding? Same folks. How do those views reflect the gospel of love, compassion, forgiveness, and service that's proclaimed by Jesus? How do you justify the unjustifiable, the inexcusable? You wrap it in the pages of Scripture and tradition and individual morality, and you call it God's will. All the while, it's really about maintaining white privilege. Recently, in a televised conversation about race between Chick-fil-A CEO Don Cathy and Christian rapper Lecrae, Atlanta megachurch pastor Louis Giglio said, "We understand the curse that was slavery, but we miss the blessing of slavery that actually built up the framework for the world that white people live in." Let me say that again. We understand the curse that was slavery, but we missed the blessing of slavery that it actually built up the framework for the world that white people live in. That's an actual quote. He actually said that. as Giglio tossed around an awkward, nonsensical Christian speak word salad, inexplicably trying to connect Jesus' crucifixion with America's legacy of white supremacy and the savage blight of slavery, Kathy and Lecrae nodded and audibly validated, as if what Giglio was saying wasn't an abject disaster, and as if it was in any way coherent in its careless bastardization of Jesus' life and death. Giglio said he prefers the term white blessing to white privilege. How positively Caucasian evangelical of him. Louis is dangerous in a way that's subtle, but it's important. He's not some old guard evangelical. He's not from some stuffy, buttoned-up pipe organ cathedral of Franklin Graham or Jerry Falwell. He doesn't bloviate damnation or pound a pulpit with brimstone warnings. He paints these beautiful word pictures of the vastness of a loving God who is always hyper-male. He is engaging, passionate, and he's mastered the pastoral art of appearing spontaneous while delivering surgically precise language, surrounded by swelling music and glowing lights, all climaxing in an emotionally manipulative moment that feels decidedly spiritual. Giglio's Passion Conferences, summer beach youth camps, and Passion City Church have largely birthed the modern, sleek, stadium rock show megachurch movement that has become ubiquitous across the country. His ministry is primarily to high school and college-age students, which means that he and men like him are shaping the next generation of American evangelicals. Millions of teenagers are lured in by the towering LED screens, slick branding, and stirring anthemic choruses, unaware that this is a gateway drug to something far more toxic and addictive. Coming at an extremely vital time in America where racial wounds are reopened and fresh, Louis is a window into a much wider and deeper problem America has. White conservative evangelicals. They haven't changed as much in their supremacy, their white supremacy, their homophobia, or their misogyny. It's only in their delivery. They've gotten catchier music and better megaphones, but the song remains sadly the same. Slaveholder religion, it's with us still. Perhaps a question has crossed your mind as I've been speaking. He hasn't gone away, he's still around, but you may be wondering, does Donald Trump promote slaveholder religion? No. What's really happening is that slaveholder religion promotes him and his like. The basic message of Christianity has never been personally appealing or followed by Donald Trump, but candidate Trump and following candidates who mimic him discovered the incredible power of slaveholder religion while attacking America's first black president. That's how it started. Why did he gain traction? It was a black man he was attacking. Now, I've read sermons by white Southern preachers, sermons delivered during the Reconstruction, the brief period when black people had political power after the Civil War, and I was struck how much they sound like the modern evangelicals and the modern politicians like Trump. This nation is in trouble. Washington is a den of corruption, and somebody needs to rise up and take our country back. That's the language of slaveholder religion after abolition. It was all about white supremacy. But it was framed as a moral crusade. Historians call it the redemption movement because it really was a matter of faith for white Southerners. Just as Make America Great is a matter of faith for many today, what it really is Make America white again. So what about the religious leaders and pastors who support and advise and participate in this Trumpian movement, people like Jerry Falwell Jr. and Paula White and Robert Jeffress, are they promoting slaveholder religion? Yes, but they don't see it. What they think they're doing is standing up for righteousness over against the liberal media. This is where religion is so powerful. It gives people a capacity to believe in spite of evidence, which means you'll never prove to them that they're wrong. It's in the book. It's in the book. How do you justify the unjustifiable, the inexcusable? You wrap it in pages of scripture and tradition and individual morality, and you call it God's will. All the while, it's really about maintaining white privilege. There's another pattern in the slaveholder religion. Separate personal faith from political engagement. If you're woke enough to know white supremacy is wrong, well, slaveholder religion would like you to stay focused on your personal piety and compassion ministries, to not be too political. So, we face the silence of white moderates as the vestige of slaveholder religion. Keep it quiet. It's not just that Trump defenders who got us here. It's not just them. It's also all the good Christian people who did nothing when a man who was endorsed by the KKK became a candidate and eventually president. A further question. How do church communities, often unaware, promote racial blindness and even racism? Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, who is a progressive evangelical Christian writer and an activist, answers the question. He says, by telling us stories that make us feel righteous about our separateness. One example, I've come to see how profoundly it shaped my understanding of the world. I learned as a white Southern boy growing up that rap music was bad music, evil even. Any white guy who grew up in rural North Carolina heard country music on the radio and bluegrass at family reunion. That's our culture. But it took religion to teach me that someone else's culture was sin. I was a minister at the local black church in my neighborhood before one of our youth pulled me aside 15 years ago, and he said to me, you need to listen to Tupac. It wasn't just about the music. He was inviting me to understand how he saw the world. I was taught that music was bad, evil even. It wasn't the music. It was racial. And racial habits are the hundreds of little ways that we perpetuate systemic racism every day just by living the way we've always lived. Churches aren't alone in reinforcing these habits, but the fact that the church remains the most segregated institution in America suggests that slaveholder religion still holds more sway than we whites want to believe. James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. American Christianity hasn't faced our legacy of slaveholder religion. Ultimately, I don't know whether we white people as a group are willing to change. But if we do not face this, we are in peril. When the house is burning down, there's no way to save your room. We're all in this together, whether we want to be or not.
The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather there to grow more generous in spirit and in action. This is the great end of all the world's faith traditions, to bring the human being closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. We now take an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will support the self-supporting church and its many ministries. The gifts of the congregation will be most gratefully received. You can support our congregation financially by donating through our YouTube landing page or by visiting our website, uuamarillo.org. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. May the fellowship of this hour touch and move our lives until we come again together.